It was a Friday night, and I was driving home after a long week of work. The roads were empty, and the only light came from the dim glow of the streetlights. I had just left a late-night coffee shop where I'd been catching up on some emails. My car was parked a few blocks away, and as I walked to it, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I told myself it was just my imagination. After all, it was almost midnight, and the streets were eerily quiet. I got into my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled out of the parking spot, I glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. There was someone sitting in the back seat. A man, dressed in all black, with a hood pulled over his head. His face was shadowed, but I could see his eyes staring directly at me. My heart dropped into my stomach. "Don't scream," he said in a calm, low voice. "Just drive." I didn't know what to do. My hands were shaking on the wheel, and my mind was racing. Should I try to jump out of the car? Should I crash it? But before I could make a decision, he spoke again. "If you do what I say, you'll be fine. Turn left at the next light." I nodded, too terrified to argue. I turned left, my mind scrambling for a way out. I thought about honking the horn or swerving into oncoming traffic, but the streets were empty. There was no one around to help me. We drove in silence for what felt like forever. He directed me through a series of turns, taking me deeper into a part of town I didn't recognize. The buildings grew older, the streets darker. Finally, he told me to pull over next to an abandoned warehouse. "Get out of the car," he said. I hesitated, but he leaned forward, and I caught a glimpse of something metallic in his hand. A knife. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stepped out, my legs trembling. He followed me, keeping a few feet of distance between us. "Walk toward the warehouse," he instructed. I did as I was told, my mind racing. Was this it? Was this how I was going to die? I thought about my family, my friends, all the things I hadn't done yet. But as I reached the door of the warehouse, he suddenly stopped. "Wait," he said. I turned around, and for the first time, I got a clear look at his face. He was younger than I'd thought, maybe in his late 20s, with a scar running down his left cheek. His expression was unreadable. "You're not who I thought you were," he said, his voice quieter now. "I made a mistake." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, frozen, as he stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I didn't wait to see if he'd come back. I ran to my car, jumped in, and sped off as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was back in my neighborhood, surrounded by familiar streets and the glow of streetlights. I parked in front of my house and sat there for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. When I finally went inside, I called the police. They took my statement, but without a name or a clear description, there wasn't much they could do. I spent the rest of the night lying awake, replaying the events in my head. The next morning, I found something tucked under my windshield wiper. It was a note written in messy handwriting. It said, "I'm sorry, you weren't the one." I never saw the man again, but I still think about him sometimes. Who was he looking for? And what would have happened if I had been the one?